Hey, welcome to episode 140 of an Evolving Man podcast. Today I'm excited to be speaking to Kalyani Pardeshi. Kalyani is a multi-award-winning author, TEDx speaker, and anti-bullying advocate known for her expertise in confronting the inner critic, self-bullying, and the roots of burnout and self-doubt. She developed powerful frameworks for identifying intangible drivers, the unconscious motivators for fulfilment, and has worked extensively with children, teens, adults, and organizations to promote sustainable performance and emotional resilience. Welcome, Kalyani.
Thank you so much for having me, Piers.
Pleasure, pleasure. So, how I'd love to begin today, as I begin practically every one of my podcasts, is about your journey. I'd love for you to share a little bit of how you got into doing this work around intangible drivers, self-bullying, and yeah.
So my background is actually in accounting. Spoiler alert, I am Asian after all. I am a certified public accountant, but I never found joy in my work at all. 15 years ago, I quit my career to raise my two young children. And in 2018, I had the opportunity to volunteer at an anti-bullying workshop at my daughter's elementary school. She was in elementary school then. Having experienced bullying in boarding school, in the workplace, and within family, I wanted to see how what was being taught today was different from what I had learned and what had changed and, you know, what I could have done differently to have ended that bullying. And it was I think it was an all-day workshop. And after attending that workshop, I was really saddened to learn that nothing had changed. What was taught decades ago is still being taught today. And my question is, if it didn't work back then, why would it work now? So then I embarked on a mission to change this. And initially, I wrote my first book, which is Unbullied: 14 Techniques to Silence the Critics Externally and Internally. However, it was only after connecting with John Lenhart of Flowcess that I truly learned how our brains work and why what is being taught around anti-bullying is actually making it worse.
Mm, thank you. So why is it that what we're teaching with anti-bullying is making it worse, Kalyani?
So we, okay, let me ask you this. I'm assuming you know how to drive a car, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. In a car, what do you control?
The steering wheel, the brakes, the accelerator.
And that's exactly how it works in our brain. We control only 10% of our brain, the conscious brain.
Mm.
90% of our brain is like the engine of the car. We have no direct control over it. So if the check engine light comes on in my car, I cannot accelerate or brake to fix that problem. I have to take it to a mechanic. In the same way, bullying is an unconscious behavior, and we're using conscious brain techniques to stop the bullying. So, fun fact, human beings can't do a don't. So if you say don't bully, the person is 3 times more likely to bully.
Mm.
So we cannot fix something using conscious brain techniques. We need to address the behavior in the unconscious brain. And that's why it doesn't work. We can say, be kind. I love the be kind message, but my whole point is, who is that really directed towards? It's directed towards the bullies. Can you ask someone like myself, who was a victim of bullying, to be kind to their bully? Even as an adult, can we be kind to people who have hurt us? We'd rather ignore them than try to be kind to them because it feels unfair. And that's kind of how our brain works. So this is how we're actually making it worse. We say, don't bully, they're going to be 3 times more likely to bully. Um, I know there is an organization here, and not naming names, here in Canada, where there's this group of people. If a child is being bullied, they reach out to this group, and this group goes to the school and basically sits down the principal. gives them a lecture about how bad the bullying is. They take the kid out of the class, give the kid time of their life for the day. So my question to this organization would be, how is what you're doing any different from what a bully is doing? Because you're coming in there, you're pretty much telling someone, and they're big, burly sort of guys, aren't you using fear tactics? And secondly, how are you equipping that child to be able to deal with bullies later in life? Aren't we enabling behavior where you always, and there's nothing wrong with leaning on someone else for help, but we all need to have certain tools that can get us to a certain point, and then beyond that point, definitely ask for help.
Thank you. Fascinating. Yeah, it is interesting that. And I mean, what for you are some of these 90% tools? I realize sometimes processes take a long time to explain, but what are some of the things we can do that, you know, are, yeah, tools which go, oh, yeah, 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 that's a way of dealing with bullying.
So I teach, when I teach anti-bullying to teachers in particular and schools, I always go through what doesn't work first. So we
Mhm.
talk about the absolve strategy, ignore the bully. Can we really ignore the bully? Does it really make them stop? Right? We tell the bully to stop. Does it really stop them?
Mhm.
We go and talk to a teacher. This ends up resulting in the law of unintended consequences. We creating three more problems. So now what the teacher has to do is has to look after the victim of bullying or the target of bullying. They have to look after the bully. They have to change schedules up so the two are not in the same area at the same time. It's just extra work. And let's be honest, our teachers are already overloaded with enough work,
Mhm.
right? So what I teach is unconscious confrontations. And what it does is it our unconscious brain believes the best about us. We take away that mercy through questions. So one of the things I teach kids is, would it be okay if I said that to you? So I teach communication guidelines and I teach unconscious confrontations. So just to give you an example, I was helping a young boy out who was teased by a girl because he loved theater.
Mhm.
And she would go on and on and on, like, you're a theater boy, you're a theater boy, theater's only for girls. So I taught him to slow his brain down because we just want to attack right back. Slow
Mhm.
down. Take a deep breath. Now, one of the things I say is whatever you want to say, practice it at least 3 times in front of a mirror. Imagine yourself in that situation, practice it. So you're rewiring your brain, right? And I said that when she says you're a theater boy, you're going to respond with, yes, I am. He's making a statement on himself, which is communication guidelines.
Mhm.
And then when she said theater's only for girls, I taught him to ask the question, well, I'm changing that. He made a statement on himself. What are you doing to change the world? And then to walk away. And he said that, and it was done. She never bullied him again. Never again.
Yeah,
I had a
yeah.
teenager come to me telling me that this was one girl who was always saying to her, why don't you just go kill yourself?
Wow.
And I said to her, you're going to practice this beforehand. I got her to practice. We did a Zoom call. I said, okay, I'm that bully, and I'm going to say this to you. You're going to take a deep breath, or you clap your hands, hum to yourself, click your fingers, because doing the physical response is way easier than doing the mental one. So you're
Mhm.
setting yourself up for success. And just to look her in the eye and say, would it be okay if I said that to you? You're not waiting for an answer, you're walking away. So remember, your unconscious brain believes the best about you. And now suddenly you've presented them with something that does not believe the best about you. And it drains your energy from wanting to bully the other person again. What
Mhm.
we're teaching in schools is tell the bully to stop, ignore them, go talk to a teacher. Friends should stand up for each other or be kind. Like, honestly, if it really worked, wouldn't we have less of bullying today?
Mm, yeah, fascinating. It's great. And I see that, obviously in the UK, and I think I've heard it as well in Canadian Parliament. There's a lot of bullying just between the different politicians, the way they talk to each other, it's very much like you're an idiot, look at this statistic, everyone's putting each other down rather than conscious relating. It feels very much like, and I know certainly in Britain, and I guess the Canadian system is based on that as well. It comes from boarding school. Parliament in the UK, he's in the Houses of Commons. It's very similar to a boarding school, and the debating chambers. It's the setup is very similar to chapel for me at boarding school. So, so I'd love for you to share a little bit about your boarding school experiences. So it's obviously had an impact. Can you share a little bit what it was like? So you were based in South Africa.
My family moved to South Africa during the peak of apartheid. So the only way to ensure I would be able to get an education that was not determined by my skin color was to send me away to a prestigious boarding school in another country. When I went there, I was 2 months shy of my 12th birthday. I was still 11.
Mm,
And everyone around me seemed to have adjusted well, but I was terribly homesick. And I cried a lot. I would
mm,
cry every single day. I couldn't understand why no one else felt this way. And it wasn't long before other students started calling me names, isolating me. I was also beaten up twice, once in front of a group of girls in the boarding house itself, and they were all cheering her on. And another time was when I was walking back from swimming. Someone punched me in my back. And I did what I was taught to do, what kids today are still taught to do, was report the bullying to teachers. The
mhm,
bullies were spoken to, they were made to apologize, but this didn't change their behavior. The bullying didn't stop. Eventually, I was told that bullying builds character. Basically, no one was going to help me. I had to face it or leave, and I chose to leave. This actually made me feel like a failure because no one else left the sporting school because of bullying.
mm. Thank you. Wow, I'm really sorry to hear your experiences.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, that thing about character, bullying, you know, helps create character. I think it's interesting. In the 1930s, the Nazis came to Britain to do exchanges with British boarding schools. I interviewed Helen Roche, a Durham professor, on the podcast. And she said that the reasons the Nazis came to Britain was they wanted to learn how the British built character in the kids. And they found it didn't come from the teachers, it didn't come from the lessons, it came from the other children. And they still, the prospectus of Eton 2022, possibly a couple of years ago, which is where they're talking about sending the Prince, Prince George. They're saying that we build character. So the same thing. They're still saying it's good for us.
So here's the thing is I'm curious to know what their definition of character is. What do they mean?
Mm, 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 mm,
Right? Because I might have a different definition. They will have a different definition. For me, if I had to think about character, I would just say, is how am I bringing out my unique self
mm, mm, mm.
versus conforming to what character really is. It's like do as I do, don't do as I do, but do as I say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? And, I would like to ask whatever this character building thing is, it's like, would you like to be treated that way?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I think for me, the character building that we're talking about, it's really dissociation. It's
Yeah.
like it's conforming.
Yeah.
It's do as I say. It's like, you're towing the line. And I kind of have talked about this a bit recently about resilience. We're talking about resilience in business and corporations, about, resilience. And I mentioned this to another leadership coach, and he said, I said, it's not resilience, it's dissociation that we're teaching. And he said, yes, that's right. And I see that it's like the character building. It's like, well, it's really teaching dissociation.
See, I love that you brought up resilience because my definition of resilience is how am I able to maintain a healthy thought process regardless of what's going on around me,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So
mm.
the key to that is I'm acknowledging it. I'm acknowledging what's happening around me, but I'm not succumbing to it. I'm going to try and bring everyone up in their thought process in a healthy way. Versus dissociation is like, okay, this is happening. We're just going to ignore it and we're just going to keep chugging forward.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's like putting a band-aid on an abscess. Eventually, that infection's going to explode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's it is, and that's what I see with so many of my clients is the dissociation. You can dissociate for so many years. Judith Herman, the
Yes.
Harvard psychiatrist, says, in the third and fourth decade, that's when the trauma that you've suppressed or you dissociated from, that then comes to the surface. And I see that with my clients. Often they've managed to dissociate and they can perform at a high level in their 20s, their 30s, but then they reach burnout, which I know is a speciality with you. I wonder if you've seen that, Kalyani, as well, the burnout and
I experienced it myself.
okay.
So, one of the things I teach is intangible drivers or uniqueness. So, I don't know if you've come across people that seem not to have empathy. They just
Mm,
seem like, well, this person has no empathy.
yeah, yeah, of course.
So, how I explain unique brain wiring is let's say you and I buy a car on the same day from the same dealership, identical cars, same make, same model, same color, same everything. A year from now, is your car going to look like mine? That's correct. It's not. Why?
Depends how I use it, really.
Exactly. In that analogy, the car is your brain and the driver is your unique brain wiring. What are you intrinsically driven to do regardless of context?
Mm,
I am intrinsically driven to show compassion. I want to bear your pain to help you grow. That's why I burnt out as a CPA because, and I always make this joke, some people laugh, some people don't. Um, in a CPA career, I
What's a
cannot make
CPA, please?
a certified public accountant, a CA,
Okay,
chartered accountant,
chartered
chartered
accountant.
accountant. So I cannot make numbers grow, at least not legally, right?
Mm,
Illegally, I can make them grow,
yeah.
but that's why I burnt out, is because I want to feel your pain so I can understand you better, so I can help you dissolve that pain so that you can grow. Now, a part of that is I have to confront people on their own destructive behaviors. For
Mm,
example, I've had to confront friends who are people pleasers and then are complaining about burning out. I ran a fitness business for 2 years. I burnt out because, again, I was trying to motivate people to get fit for their mental health, but I am intrinsically designed, my brain is designed to bear their pain, not to encourage and motivate them. I can do it temporarily, but if I continuously operate my brain in that way, it's like putting jet fuel into a car and expecting it to run. The engine will turn over, but it's going to stall after a while. So there are people who are, so for example, my son is not intrinsically motivated by compassion. He's intrinsically motivated by helping you understand the why. He loves explaining the why of everything.
mm,
So when I was getting him to support my daughter, who went away to Europe for 10 days in March this year, she was ditched by her friends. So she felt very lonely and she was crying a lot. So my son has experienced that too. So I said to him, kiddo, I get it. Compassion is not something that comes to you naturally. You're not wired that way. But do you remember how you felt when you were ditched by your friends? I said, yeah, I do. I said, then think about that and use words that come to you when you think of that situation. And that's how I put him in that empathetic state where he was able to show his sister empathy and connect with her on that level. So this is how I teach people who are not naturally inclined to show empathy is imagine any situation. If you're dealing with someone that's feeling very sad, imagine a similar situation that made you sad. What would
Mm.
you have wanted to hear in that situation? And then channel those words through to the other person.
That's beautiful. Thank you. It reminds me a lot of that in Buddhism, the compassion practices of
Right?
may no being suffer as I have suffered. And I really found that it's almost like, and I see that with boarding school or any kind of trauma or any kind of challenge. If we start to feel it and we actually really fully somatically breathe, feel it in our body, then when someone else goes through the same thing, we can go, oh, that's what it's like to lose a loved one. Oh, that's what it's like to lose your friendship group and to feel it. And what happens, I notice within myself, and my heart opens.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I think the biggest issue is people avoid tension,
Mm, mm,
but we need tension to grow. It's like an arrow that's being pulled back before it launches. So, whenever someone is in a difficult situation, instead of actually acknowledging what they're feeling, even just agree with their pain, you may not understand it. It's like, wow, that must be so hard. I'm so sorry you're going through that. Would you like to share more? We
mm,
are designed to be toxically positive, which is another way in which we bully ourselves. Is like, oh, just be positive.
mm,
Things happen for a reason. It will get better.
mm,
How does that help them in the moment? It's
mm,
because people don't want to step into that tension. I am currently helping a friend out right now who lost one of her twin daughters
mm,
to cancer. And, I think this is an issue with South Asian people in particular, is that we're not taught empathy. We're not taught to share our feelings. We're a fix-it type of culture. It's like if your kid is struggling with studies, instead of trying to understand the cause of it, just get him a tutor, right?
mm,
If a marriage is in trouble, just have kids. It'll
mm,
fix everything. It's a fix-it culture. So one of the things this friend of mine has said to me is like, nobody lets me talk about my dead child, right? Everyone's like, just move on.
mm,
Like, how am I supposed to move on? I don't answer that question. I'll say, do you want me to answer that question? Because I'll be honest with you, I have no idea how one can move on past that. Take your
mm.
time. Take your time.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like with death. My wife, as you probably know, she died at the beginning of this year, and I've noticed that over the years with death is that for the first couple of weeks, people are very open and they give
Right,
us space to grieve. But then after about 2 weeks, people move on because they have other
correct.
things in their life.
Right.
But the grief, I'm still feeling that. I was crying yesterday. I was going through some of her belongings, and it
Oh,
was like, yeah, there was tears again. And I think that's the normal thing. I had a friend of mine who I was at school with. He died in his 20s, and his mother, she grieved for about 2 years. And because I was so dissociated at the time, I was like, get over it. Yeah,
right.
yeah, move on, come on. But that's because I was very shut down and very wounded. And yet I saw afterwards as she'd processed it, whereas I hadn't. And it came back later on as a breakdown and burnout for me. And I love that how you are with your friend, just giving her space to see her, to hear her. So yeah.
And that's just it. It's like, and part of seeing her and hearing her is also where now she is unfortunately, using the other child as a source of support.
Mm,
And my whole point, because one of the things, and I really appreciate that she takes these confrontations very well, is she'll say to me, "Oh, this child's very mature." And my whole point is, does she have a choice in being very mature?
mm,
You
mm,
know, are you letting her be a child?
mm,
Right?
mm,
I think one of the biggest things is, you know, we have certain expectations of family members. And that's where our anger comes from, is because those expectations are not met. And the hardest thing is, and I say this is like, what would life look like if you accepted that they're never going to change? They're
mm,
never going to give you what you need. What would you do differently if you accepted that? How would you approach the relationship differently?
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, it's lovely.
Because ultimately, we have no control over how other people behave. We only have control over how we respond to that behavior.
Mm, mm,
I talk about being bullied by family. What did I do? I set boundaries. I cannot change them. They
mm,
cannot see what they're doing is wrong. But it's again that whole concept of boarding school and control. And don't try and control me. My point is, would you like me to control you?
mm,
So if it's not okay for you, why is it okay for me? If it's wrong for you, why is it right for me? So I
mm,
present people with contradictions. And when you present an unconscious brain with contradictions, it's going to drain your energy because it wants you to be in integrity. It wants you to say and do. It has to match. And that's what
mm,
these unconscious confrontations does, is it presents you with contradictions. It's like, nah, you can't do this if you're not willing to do it yourself.
mm,
You can't
mm,
say this unless you're willing for someone to say that to you.
mm,
It's about
mm,
integrity. So again, we can't change the behavior of others. We need to change our own behavior. And that was my boundary, even leaving boarding school in the 80s when mental health was not even a thing. I chose my mental health.
mm.
So now when I think of it, I was a rebel back then. I'm still a rebel today.
Yeah, 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 great. And it's great that you are, because maybe if you hadn't been a rebel, you wouldn't have left.
No,
You would have
exactly.
stayed there and, you know, I, I mean, I'd love for you maybe to explore a bit. You've just mentioned there about boarding school and control. Could you talk a bit about that? About why you feel that people either who come out of boarding schools feel that control or the system itself is like that.
I think, and again, when I think about myself, because it's like a dictatorship, you're being told what to do,
Mm,
and it doesn't feel right. Instinctively, it doesn't feel right. What happens is when you come out of there, you've had no control over your life. It's been dictated to you. So you're going to try and control everything else,
mm, mm,
right? It is that feeling of, well, I couldn't control that, but now I'm going to control everything going forward.
mm, mm,
Even if you think about families where parents have behaved like dictators, we are, whatever we do with that 10% of our brain, we're teaching the 90% of our brain that's what we want to do. Our unconscious brain is amoral. It doesn't care about right or wrong. It's just going to do, it's monkey see, monkey do. It's going to do exactly as what you see others do.
mm,
It requires intense self-awareness to pause and say, wait a minute, I don't like what this is happening. I don't like what's being done. So why are we doing this? I'll give you a very, very good example. Um, Growing up, one of my dad's preferred forms of punishment was the silent treatment.
mm,
And it would make me feel very guilty and make me apologize. I did not like that. But when my daughter was really little, I kind of did the same thing to her. I'd give her the silent treatment. But it didn't make her apologize. It didn't have the same reaction in her that it did in me, right? And then I had to pause and ask myself as, wait a minute, I didn't like this. So why am I doing this to her? So I had to learn how to communicate and say, I need to pause from this conversation. I promise you, I'm not giving you, we jokingly called it the Cold War between us. So I said, I'm not giving you the Cold War, but I do not want to react in a destructive way. So let me walk away, let me think, and I'll come back to you. And then I'll go back to her and then I'll say, look, I feel, you know, this was wrong. This is how it hurt me. Not that you did this, because I'm not going to use those accusatory statements. I'm not going to make statements on her. You
Mm.
did this and you this. It's like, this is what was said. This is how it made me feel.
Mm.
Okay. I want to hear your side of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's almost like it's when we make those I statements and just rather than blaming you, come back to I, that I often find that transforms things. It's like, no, I'm not saying it's to do with you. I'm saying this is what I feel. And I've heard this a lot in I think NVC, non-violent communication. They talk a lot about that, giving a statement of what the action, what's happened, when you do that, what's the feeling, and then how would you like it to be different? So. So, I mean, this control thing, I love kind of what you've said there. Nick Duffel talks about it a bit in Wounded Leaders, this idea that when we get to boarding school, you know, there's nothing we can control out there. So we kind of internalize, so we try and control our emotions, we control everything. Whereas the natural way is for us to regulate our emotions with our parents, that attachment figure. I talked to Paul Sunderland on my podcast a couple of weeks ago about addictions, and he said stress without attachment equals trauma. And in these schools, we had no attachment. So it's almost like when we have stress at home or we have an attachment figure around, we can regulate or not if we don't have that attachment. But in these schools, we have the stress, you were bullied, there's no attachment, it becomes trauma. And it's kind of fascinating to hear that and to see. So we try and control everything and we dissociate.
Right. Um, Trauma, I believe, is anything that feels like a threat to our lives,
Mhm, mhm,
right?
mhm,
And sometimes how our brain functions is that even if we've experienced a certain stress in boarding school, a certain words we've heard, we have a certain, you know, emotion associated with it. Now, we might have left boarding school years ago. That becomes a trigger word for us. And if we hear someone else say it, our brain is so dissociated that it does not recognize we're in a different situation with different people. It's no longer boarding school, but then, you want to attack the person that said that word
mhm,
because we've not rehearsed our triggers and recognized that, okay, this is what triggers me. How do I want to respond to it differently? It is, building that gap in our brain. How do we build this gap? And control is unfortunately a big thing. I mean, it's not just about boarding school. We've had families where the parents are controlling, so the children become controlling.
mhm,
Because again, monkey see, monkey do. We don't recognize I didn't like this feeling, so why am I repeating this behavior? Right? Um, I mean, I remember when my transition from boarding school to going away to university, I think what I really enjoyed about university is that the only quote unquote control was the time I attended classes. Everything else, when I had meals, when I went to bed, when I woke up, that was in my control. So that was a good feeling. But I remember we used to jokingly say in boarding school, we had, I can't even remember the count anymore, it's been years, but we were controlled from by bells. What bell woke you up? What
mhm,
bell told you to go to breakfast? What bell told you to start eating? What bell told you to stop eating? Everything was controlled.
mhm.
Everything. Like this was pre-cell phone era. I mean, you want to make a phone call home, that was controlled. What you ate was controlled.
Mm.
Everything was controlled.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see in society, we have a similar thing is everything people with there's a lot of control around us at the moment. And I wonder how much of that is that unconscious programming that so many of our leaders globally have been to these schools. And therefore they're still in that controlling rather than trusting. So for me, a lot of my work is with leaders, and I see that we're transforming from that old command and control, the old Victorian way of you do as I say, and it's quite brutal. But that's only until quite recent that was still running. Jack Welch, the CEO of GE Capital, was it G or just GE? He was very much a command and control. When he left GE, according to Simon Sinek in his work, is saying that the company didn't collapse, but it really dropped because he didn't leave the company in a very good space. He didn't develop the people around him. He wasn't an emotionally intelligent leader. And I see that it is changing now, that there are leaders who are changing. But I see that it's more in the US rather than the UK. We haven't quite got this yet. And and I think partly it's that control. We're trying to control all aspects. And this is something which has come to the fore over the summer as I've spoken to a number of people about boarding school and about micromanaging. One of the things, because of that control, when you go into a leadership position, you try and micromanage everything. And as we know, that's not possible to do. And what it leads to is burnout. And when I've spoken to people about micromanaging, and I said, "Did you go to boarding school?" And they were like, "Yeah."
How did you know? That's right. It makes so much sense. So the key to happiness is having a balance. You have to be in the middle of what I call a conjunctive, perfection and control.
Mm, mm,
So what happens is, people try because they can't get things perfect, they're going to try and control whatever they can. So they're completely on the opposite side. And then you get people that are trying to perfect everything and then they lose control. So you kind of need a perfect balance of the two, where
mm,
it's okay if it's not perfect. There are things that do need to be controlled, certain actions that do need to happen, but not everything needs to be controlled. So it has to be a balance between the two. I mean, it's interesting you talk about control. It's every aspect of my life, not just in boarding school, but even at home, was controlled. So for me, going to university was the best thing. It really was because I believe I was always a responsible person. So I knew how to balance it all out, the fun, the studying, everything. Um, and that's what's missing. It's like, why don't we try to balance everything out? It's like, what needs to be controlled? Let's focus on you can have no control,
mm,
but what
mm,
needs to be controlled and what parameters are there? So people have like the minimum to the maximum, a range, not like it has to be this way. This is the range. Let's work within that range. Um, and then where is it that we can give up control? And we need to give up control. So, I mean, here's a classical example. My son is very lazy when it comes to, keeping his room clean and stuff like that. So, where I've given up control, I'll say to him, this is what needs to be done. Okay, I need it done by the end of today. Whenever you do it is fine, but this is what needs to be done. You tell me how are you going to do it? So it's not really like I am telling you what to do. It's like this needs to be done because we live together in one house and hygiene is really important. It's good for everyone's health. So how are we going to get this done? You tell me how. I'm going to tell you the what. I'm also going to
mm,
tell you the why. You just tell me the how.
mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Thank you. That's really fascinating. And it's interesting as you're talking about perfectionists, it reminds me of Tal Ben-Shahar's work, that Harvard professor, and he talks about this idea of the optimalist. The perfectionist believes there's an island out there which is perfection, and I'm going to get there, and I keep striving to get there. And actually, the optimalist is like it's a guiding star. I know that I'm not going to get there, but I will move towards that direction. And therefore, we can let go of one day I will get to perfection. And actually, no, it's an ongoing journey of, letting go. And it then reminds me of the Stoic philosophy that controlling the controllables. What can I control? My
Influence the
feelings,
rest.
yeah,
Yes.
what I focus on, my breath, my body posture, everything else, the 99%, I can't control that.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
No.
uh, and I think that a lot of people, not just boarding school, but we try and control that 99%.
And that's the key. Sorry if I'm interrupting you. Is
Oh,
like
please.
if people are struggling to give up control, I think one of the ways to encourage them to give up control is what can you control? What's within your control? What do
Mm,
you want to control within yourself? You can control how you choose to show up. You can, and I don't like the word control feelings because it's like, I don't want you to suppress what you're feeling, but
mm,
how can you manage those feelings? Share it with someone else. Get those emotions out before you show up for work or before you show up as a leader. Because the definition of a leader is, you know, working towards the purpose and progress, they facilitate the purpose and progress of others.
mm,
So how can you be, it doesn't, you don't have to be the best version of yourself, but how can you be the most resilient version of yourself to show, to set that example for others? And part of it is being vulnerable. It's like,
mm,
um, sharing how you're feeling. It's like, you know what, guys, I'm feeling really stressed today. You know, this is what's going on. Get them involved. Make them
mm,
feel like they're part of the journey. Make them feel it's okay for them to share their feelings. I think one of the biggest issues, and I believe we spoke about this, is, storytelling and vulnerability, right?
mm,
More than storytelling, I think story hearing needs to be something that's taught. Because here's the thing, we can share our stories, but the reason we hold back is because other people are going to judge us. How do we hear a story well is when we reflect a less negative emotion back to the other person. And what I mean by less negative doesn't mean, oh, everything's going to be okay. It's like, wow, that must have been so rough,
mm,
right? Please feel free to share some more. Because when we get better at hearing stories instead of trying to make the person move on quickly, they're going to feel more safe to share more vulnerably. I mean, one of the examples I give in my latest book, Beyond the Inner Critic, understanding your conscious and unconscious bullies, is when one of the reasons I don't share with my mom is because she catastrophizes things. So she does not hear a story well. So if I'm sharing a certain stress, she's going to tell me the 50 different ways it's going to go totally south from there.
mm,
In her mind, she's really trying to help me so I can mentally prepare for it, but it's not actually helping me. So we need to learn how to hear other people's stories. It is like, this is where the control part is. This is where we give up control of trying to figure it out by ourselves. We cannot grow in isolation. We need each other to grow. We need each other's uniqueness to grow. I mean, my mentor is an administrator teacher. So he's going to facilitate the purpose and progress of other people by coordinating them towards a goal and helping them understand the why. So what I'll do is I will share my goals with him and he can help me get to my goals. I don't need to figure it out for myself.
mm,
I really don't. My husband is a giver. His uniqueness is to be able to give ideas for improvement. So I will tell him what my process is, and then he'll say to me, okay, you can change this, this, and this in your process. I don't need to figure it out for myself.
mm, mm.
Totally went off on a tangent there, but
No, that it's useful. It's useful to hear because I've heard one of my colleagues talk about this idea that because, for example, in boarding school, our wound was created in a group. Often
yes.
it's actually the healing is found in a group and hearing people's stories, especially for us, I feel that we have never shared our experiences before because one of the unwritten rules of these schools was you don't speak up, you don't grass, and if you do, what happens is, as you said, it just gets worse because the teachers aren't there most of the time. And I think I learned quite quickly that grassing was not a good idea because I was with these boys most of the time. And I think that by sharing stories as adults now, and by you sharing your experiences, someone else can go, "Oh my God, that happened to me." And we don't feel alone anymore. And suddenly our experiences, rather than being, "I'm all alone," suddenly, and I've done boarding school circles over a number of years. I stopped them last year because of the documentary. But it was so healing, and some people would say that's the first time I've ever felt heard.
And that's it. Because when I was in boarding school and I was crying and I was homesick, I'm pretty sure everyone else felt that way too,
Hmm.
but they weren't willing to admit it because I probably looked too emotional or too weak, and they didn't want to be perceived that way.
Hmm. Hmm.
And all it would have taken is someone to say to me, you know what? I feel the way you do too. I'll tell you what helps me. Would you be interested in listening to that?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, 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 yeah. And for me, it's almost like having a teacher or somebody there, but often the teachers for me, and certainly in my school and many of the schools I've studied, they went to boarding schools themselves. So therefore they're carrying the same wounds and therefore they've no idea what to do apart from dissociate. So, I remember going to see my head housemaster because I had homesickness the first few weeks, and he said, "You'll get over it." And I went back a few weeks later and I said, "Oh, I'm still homesick." And he says, "You'll get over it." Because he'd been to boarding school himself. He had no idea how to deal with
It's
it.
funny. It's like he probably heard the same words, "You'll get over it."
Exactly.
And he just repeated that. And in that situation would have helped for him to say, you know what? I went to boarding school too, to share his own story. I really
Mm,
do get how you feel. Those first few weeks are so hard. This is what I did. Would you like to hear what I did? What helped me? Right. And I believe we were in boarding school at a time where we probably spoke to our parents maybe once a week because it was too expensive to make calls. And we used to write letters, right? We used to write letters.
mm, mm,
And, just not having that constant contact with what felt safe to us, I think it's that feeling of abandonment, right?
mm, mm.
Like you feel like you've been abandoned.
Yeah, 100%.
And
And
I don't know about you, but in my culture, it's a joke, or even kids are threatened. It's like, oh, if you don't behave, we'll send you to boarding school. So in my mind, I was thinking, what did I do wrong? Why am I here?
yeah.
Right? I was a bad girl. I even remember the first weekend speaking to my mom and promising to do all the chores in the world.
Mm,
But I didn't add the part like because I want to come back home.
mm,
Like
mm,
I'll listen, I'll do everything,
mm.
but take me away from here.
Yeah. How long did you end up staying for, Kalyani?
So I stayed around, I want to say a year and a half.
Mm,
Um, and then it was the second term of my second year there that and I wasn't even being actively bullied. I just could not stand being away from home and feeling unsafe all the time.
mm, mm,
Um, Even though I wasn't actively being bullied at that time, I felt, and this is part of having compassion as my uniqueness, is I can feel what other people are feeling. It's like I could feel that hatred for me. And maybe
mm,
that hatred was, okay, here is someone who has no fear and no shame in expressing how she feels. While we all have to act tough, she doesn't have to.
mm. Yeah, yeah.
I've
Sounds
been
like.
told, yeah, I've been told I wear my heart on my sleeve. My whole point is why hide what I'm feeling?
Mm,
I'm not verbally vomiting on you. I'm sharing how I'm feeling so you understand that if I look pissed, this is why,
yeah.
right? It's like it's not anything to do with you. It's all me.
Mm. My wife used to say exactly the same thing, that she used to wear her heart on her sleeve and she would share her experiences of childhood because she's felt once people know me, they've got nothing that they can hold against me or they've got no baggage. There's nothing hidden.
Right? What you see is what you get.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
See,
And
and I
nothing.
love that. I absolutely love that because so many people wear masks.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not into that. I mean, it's so funny. My son, and it's funny how people perceive this. My son was sharing because he started high school in a new school this year, and he was sharing how two guys walked up to him in gym class and said, "Oh, we don't have any friends." And he said, "Okay, cool. Let's just start talking, right?" And it's so funny because he shares this story with my daughter. My daughter's like, "Oh no, that's like ending your social life. You don't go around saying that." I'm like thinking, why? Like, why would you not say that?
Mhm,
He ended up making two new friends. They ended up making a friend in him. What if it actually helps you?
mhm,
Like, why are we judging ourselves so harshly because we don't want to share how we feel because we're afraid of being judged? My whole point is let's flip that script. What if it actually helps you?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, 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 yeah. So I'd love for us to sh segue a little bit into the inner critic,
Sure.
that self-bullying, because I see
Yeah.
that this is something I talked about with guests quite a lot over the years, is the inner critic and this idea that complex PTSD that Pete Walker talks about. There's our inner critic and the outer critic is quite virulent if we've had that early trauma. What are some of the things you've seen with the inner critic and self-bullying? And then what are some of the ways we can combat this that work for you?
So I think inner critic and self-bullying are two separate things. The inner critic we're all
I missed
very
that
familiar
first
with.
bit.
Sorry.
Sorry, the your audio's cutting out at the beginning, so I
I'm
just missed that
sorry.
first bit.
I think the inner critic and self-bullying are two separate things.
Okay.
Okay, so the inner critic we're all very familiar with. It's the mean things we say to ourselves, usually in response to something that's happened to us externally. I didn't get a certain contract. I submitted a speaker proposal, it was rejected. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm a failure, etc., etc., etc. Um, Self-bullying, I believe, is the so-called positive motivational response to the inner critic,
Okay.
which in the long term leads to burnout. So a typical example is I left boarding school. I felt like a failure. I was excessively hard on myself. What didn't help my situation is because we lived in a very toxic community, my parents would get me to hide out in the master bedroom every time we had guests over, pretending I was away at boarding school. I was not allowed to talk about it because I'm away from there. It's done. It's over. Move on. So I felt like a failure. I started pursuing overachievement. And the last time I counted, I think I had somewhere between 11 to 13 certifications to my name.
Wow.
Um, we moved houses recently and I started shredding everything. I was like, wow, holy crap, I have so much here, right? But it was me trying to prove to myself that I'm not a failure.
Mhm.
So, one question I like to ask is why are the lies our inner critic tells us so easy to believe? Why do you think so?
I think partly because we've told ourselves them so many times, and then as well, others around us are running those same lies. So it's almost like, well, this is just the way it is.
I love that. So I believe these lies are so easy to believe because they're presented as facts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fact I submitted a speaker proposal. It's a fact it was rejected. We're lumping, right? It's something that happened to me, but it's not who I am. Who I am are my intangible drivers, my uniqueness. That's who I am. This is what happened to me. So we have to separate the two issues. I like giving the example of boarding school, right? So when I look at the facts, Fact is, yes, I left boarding school because of bullying. Fact is, yes, my parents got me to hide in the master bedroom every time we had guests. Those are facts. But does it mean I'm a failure? No. The truth is a formula. It's a right what with a right why and a right how. So when I look at this situation, what's the truth of me leaving boarding school? If it is, I left boarding school because of bullying. I was trying to protect my mental health, right? That's why I left it. So if I look at it from that perspective, I'm actually not a failure. I'm a hero because I did something no one was willing to do back in the 80s. I chose my mental health over my education. Who does that? Who
Mm.
does that? So, whenever we talk about the inner critic, I would like to say to a person, whatever you're saying to yourself, is it facts or is it truth? Look at it as two separate things. It's not going to change the truth of who you are. And when we understand our intangible drivers, our uniqueness, and I have a quiz on my website for it, that is who you are. What happens to you is not who you are. It's something that's happened. Another example I like to give is for an organization I'd spoken for before. They had sent me proposals. They'd open up their proposals. I'd sent in 6 proposals. They rejected all 6 of them.
Mm.
Now, I could totally go into failure mode there and say, well, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. What did I do? First of all, I got my emotions out with my husband. I said, you know what? This is what's happened. He's a giver. I asked him for an idea. So he said, you know what? Ask them for feedback. And
Mhm.
don't do it from the perspective of, why didn't you pick me? But do it from the perspective of, where did I go wrong? And how can I do better in the future? And that's what I did. I was really humble about it. It's like, you know what? I really appreciate that you took the time to look at these proposals. I understand that, these were not what you were looking for this year. Please, can you tell me how can I do better in future? They came back to me. It turned out that they'd actually not even looked at my proposals and they ended up approving 2 of them. So, pause and ask questions. When you're being hard on yourself, first of all, separate the issue from who you are. Secondly, ask questions. This is what's happened. How can I deal with it? When it comes to self-bullying, especially I love to use the example of people pleasing or overachievement, toxic positivity. Once you've done what you've done, you've achieved something, you've made someone happy, you have been toxically positive. How do you feel afterwards? Are you proud of yourself? Because that's what would happen to me is after every achievement, I'd feel worse. Because it was not helping me not feel like a failure because again, I was lumping issues. This is what happened to me. This is who I am. And ultimate happiness comes from showing up in our uniqueness, regardless of the situation, in that healthy thought process. So for me, is I will confront people when I see themselves tearing themselves down or doing things that they think is positive, but it's actually breaking them down. Again, with the inner critic, one other question I love to ask is, what are you hoping to achieve by being hard on yourself? What's the end
Mm.
goal?
Mm. Mm. What are you wishing to achieve? Wishing to achieve by being hard on yourself. Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I think certainly, yeah, when I was beginning this journey of self-discovery in my 20s, my inner critic was so tough. Yeah, it would come back with a lot of virulence. Basically, my belief coming out of boarding school was you're a piece of shit. And even though I was successful, and that's kind of something I've been touching upon quite a bit with my clients recently, is this belief of either I'm a failure or I'm not good enough. But it leads a bit like you've said to trying to perform too much. but it then leads to burnout because it's like you can never stop. You've got to keep going and keep going. You've got to keep going. And this can last for 10, 20 years or 5, 10 years or 2, 3 years, but you get to a point where you can't do anymore. The body
Right,
gives up.
exactly. Exactly. Exactly that. Your unconscious brain is literally trying to get your attention that, dude, you are good enough.
Mm,
You don't
mm,
need to do this. But if you keep outrunning it and you keep trying to outrun it, that's what's going to lead to burnout because our unconscious brain tries to get our attention to when things are in contradiction by making us feel unsettled. So I like to describe this feeling as, when you feel upset, but you don't know why,
mm, mm,
that's your unconscious brain trying to communicate with you. And the way to get to the answer is play charades with someone. To get them, is it work? Is it something that happened at home? Is it something you saw on the internet? Is it this? Is it that? I mean, another way I also like to, my husband and I disagree on this, is I can see another speaker, I can see them so successful. I'm like, well, I'm not there yet. And I'm like thinking, okay, but is that person's uniqueness the same as mine?
mm.
No. Have I done exactly what this person has done? No. So is it really fair for me to compare? No, right? So ultimately, we can be our own worst enemies. We
Mm,
really can. And when you say somebody says they're not good enough, what's their definition of good enough? What are you measuring it at? What's
mm,
the benchmark for good enough?
mm,
Right? What's the definition? What's the measure for it? Piece of shit. What's the definition? What's the measure for it?
mm,
The reason we struggle is because we have different definitions for the same words. I like to give the definition of love. If I ask someone, what's love? Well, I don't know. It's this feeling. Well, it's going to be different for everybody. Love is to give without expecting anything in return from the person to whom you gave.
mm,
That's
mm,
love.
mm,
Happiness. What's happiness? Experiencing effects that exceed expectations.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, fascinating. So as we start to wrap this up, thank you for sharing. It's been really fascinating. What's one last message or something you've not shared yet that you're drawn to sharing?
I like to say the ultimate answer to everything is knowing who you are, your intangible drivers, your uniqueness, and to repair your thought process around it. Now, that's something I help people with. I was given the thought from a childhood from my parents, my mom in particular, that I was too emotional and too weak and I needed to toughen up.
Mhm,
Now, if I'm operating in an unhealthy thought process as someone who is compassionate, I will enable other people. I will be too emotional. I will be too weak. So it is true. So I needed to repair that thought process, number one, and repair the behavior around it. Ultimately, separate who you are from what you do and what's happened to you. When you can separate those two, that's when you can slowly start to find peace.
mm. Thank you. That's great. Really interesting. Yeah, and thank you for your work and thank you for your time today, Kalyani. And for people, if you'd like to learn more, I put her website into the description. It's kalyanispeaks.com. And I'll also put a link to your TEDx talk where you're talking about bullying, which is a really interesting, fascinating talk. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you.
Really nice speaking to you too. Thank you, Piers.
Okay, take care. Bye for now.